Hello and welcome. Today I've got Andy Byrne here from Hammers United. Now, you may or may not know, you probably took part in it yourself, but a little while back, Hammers United held a survey to canvass the opinion of all West Ham fans on many, many different subjects. And what we're here today to do is to give you the results of that survey and talk you through it. So first of all, Andy, welcome, my friend.
Thanks very much, mate. Thanks for having me on.
No, you're very, very welcome. So first of all, let's get straight to it. When did you hold the survey? Why did you hold the survey?
Survey took place back in December, so it closed just over a month ago, closed on 27th of December. Three main reasons. One, to try and get to know our membership, find out a little bit more about them. Two, to set ourselves some short-term priorities. And three, to help us with our long-term direction and vision.
Absolutely. And do you feel that the survey was a success? Yeah. Well, obviously, I say you're happy the results, whatever comes in, obviously comes in. But you're happy with everything went? All the different people that participated?
Really pleased, mate. Really pleased, because it's difficult sometimes, especially when you're, inside the bubble, so to speak, to make sure that things that you are doing are along the right lines and that you are representing your members correctly. And when you get this sort of feedback, which was really detailed feedback and really positive feedback, it's kind of comforting to know that the decisions that you're making are in line with what your members would like you to do. No,
that's great. Listen, what I want to do is, you've kindly supplied me with the graphics and the breakdowns and pie charts. I feel like I'm at school, Andy. So before I give everybody the feedback that I'm sure people want to know, I just feel it's appropriate that we discuss exactly who took part in this survey. Now, I've got a profile of the survey itself here. It basically says that all age groups are represented, and ages between sort of the age of 19 and 80. What sort of age brackets were we talking about there? Because it says 5 to 8 of the age brackets were very well represented.
So we had under 19s and over 80s, and then we broke it down into 10s in between that. So your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, etc. And pleasingly, all of those had at least a 10% representation, a 10% spread, so to speak, apart from the oldest and the youngest. So I guess our challenge is to try and reach out a little bit more to those fans at either end of the age spectrum.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Myself and the other in the 20s age bracket were delighted to take part, Andy. Now, it says here that the vast majority, 90% of those who took the survey, actively supported the club for 20 years. 41% were current ticket holders. 26% had held a season ticket at Upton Park. And approximately 85% of the respondents visited the London Stadium at least once in a typical season, but well over half visited the London Stadium at least 6 matches during a normal campaign, which of course we're not in a normal campaign. So I think it's fair to say this is a good representation of season ticket holders and people that have attended London Stadium. I'm not sure if we actually even mentioned it. How many people took the survey, mate? I know we're going to get to that graphic in just a second.
Yeah, we had a really pleasing response, actually. We had over 5,000 people take the survey. So you can see it up there, 5,330. And in a time when we're not able to reach out to people in any other way other than social media, this was a really pleasing response. We'd normally be at grounds talking to people, going around leafleting, trying to get people involved. So we were nervous when we put the survey out that it wouldn't get a significant response, and to get over 5,000 people completing it was fantastic. As your graphic showed, we had a large number of people completing it that weren't Hammers United members, which is really important for us as well. So it's
what's FSA mean, if I may interrupt you there? The graphic said said non-FSA or FSA affiliated group.
Yes, so we had different options on the survey where you could select whether you were a member of an FSA affiliated group. So West Ham has a number of groups who are affiliated to the FSA, a number of supporters groups. You could select whether you were a member of one of those. Hammers United is one of those. So you could select Hammers United, or indeed you could select whether you weren't currently a member of any group. And what that does is it gives us a really good flavour of not only what are the opinions of our members, but also what is the opinion of the fan base in general. And the important thing for us in terms of the numbers is just that the results that we have are statistically significant. So once you reach out to over 1,000 people, the result that you have will stand up to scrutiny in terms of it's not going to change if you were to reach out to a great deal more people. And so, you know, it's really nice to be able to compare what Hammers United members want and to be able to say that we have statistically significant results of what they want, and also what the general West Ham fan base wants, and to say that we have statistically significant results that shows what they want as well.
Just quickly, I just want to, where did you ask? Where did you try and canvass his opinion? Where did you advertise and let people know that there was a survey that they could participate in?
So the survey was kindly hosted by the FSA, and then that FSA link was shared on as many West Ham platforms as we could get it across. Yourselves obviously helped us to publish. People like X and various podcasts have helped to get it outside of our bubble, so to speak. Knees Up Mother Brown, and, you know, and our own website and our own social media channels as well. Yeah, no,
I think I just wanted to ask a rhetorical question, really. I saw it absolutely everywhere. So if you missed it, what have you been reading? Moving on to the first, I say the first slide. I think this is really interesting. So this is West Ham United on the pitch. This is, how do you currently feel about management of the club from a football perspective? Just talk us through this, if you would, please, Andy.
So we wanted to gather a first couple of questions around sentiment. So here you have the sentiment expressed specifically relating to the football on the pitch. And it's no surprise to see you've got approximately 80% of non-members and members of other groups, and 80% of Hammers United members feeling really positive about things on the pitch at the minute.
Yeah, and it is clear that there is they do mirror each other, the non-affiliate and obviously the affiliate membership. There's a similar sentiment throughout the fan base there. I do wonder if, following the cup defeat to Manchester United, that graph may have dipped slightly, but we'll see. We'll see. It was, as you say, we started this in December, but I do feel that there is a good feeling towards the team at present. Okay, I mean, probably I believe the biggest part of your poll, and what I find really interesting here is the subject matter will come up in just a minute. But this is the first real difference I've seen between Hammers United members and non-members on this one. It's not a surprise, I've got to be honest with you, Andy. But so this is West Ham United off the pitch. Just talk us through this one, please, mate.
Well, so you can see first of all that the graph shift completely the other way, and this was kind of what we expected to happen. So anecdotally, we talked to a lot of people about their frustrations with the club, and why, you know, dissatisfaction or a disconnect exists. And by and large, the frustrations that people experience are to do with matters off the pitch and the running of the club away from the pitch itself. But you can see that those who are Hammers United members, their negative sentiment, if you like, around issues off the pitch is up around 90% of our members. And then still very significant, but the negative sentiment of the fan base in general is up around 70%. With about 20% of them reporting feeling neutral about the running of the club off the pitch, but still, you know, if you flip it and look at positives, you've only got 9% of the fan base in general. This is non-Hammers United members. You've only got 9% of them feeling positive about the running of the club off the pitch. So I guess that tells us where the issue lies in terms of the sentiment of the fan base at present.
Absolutely, and that's a lot more nuanced than just that. That's a big graph. We're going to get, I think the next one is quite telling. I think it's also fair to say that the Hammers United members and others, just by its very definition, if you've taken the time to go and join Hammers United, then you're going to be more displeased with the owners than if you hadn't done so already, certainly. I feel what's coming up now is this is what you're mandated, I think, to look at by your members. So this is what they've asked for, and if we just bring this up here, these are your immediate priorities. Talk us through this, please, mate.
It's exactly what you said. It's a mandate. So when we were first formed, we had we were given one clear priority by our members, which was to engage in structured dialogue with the club as an independent supporters group. Now, what I mean by that is not joining the official supporters board, which was in place at the time. And you'll see this question was structured in such a way that it asked about the independent supporters committee. So the question asked supporters, when the independent supporters committee has been created, which it now has been, what will you then see as your priorities, as your immediate priorities for that independent supporters committee. So effectively, we were transitioning from priority number one as a group, which our members stipulated in our very first meeting, which was to establish independent dialogue with the club. And we now need to transition into priority number two. Now that that dialogue is established, what do you and what did a wider fan base see as their priorities? Interestingly, people could only select three. So what we said for that question was you can't just tick that you want us to work on everything. You have to select what you want your top three. So what is most important to you right now? And you can see that the Independent Supporters Committee, interestingly, not just Hammers United, but the whole of the committee has been given a mandate to continue to campaign for a change in ownership. So that has come out as the top priority when people had to prioritise. And then you've got the look and the feel of the London Stadium not so far behind. And linked to that is bringing more local businesses and sellers to the London Stadium. All the others, if you put them into a list, none of them score higher than what you can see at the bottom there.
Okay, I just want to really clear up the Independent Supporters Committee. I hate abbreviations. I think so much can get lost in abbreviations. But I'm gonna. Okay, so we had the OSB before. I'm going against my own rule here, which is the Official Supporters Board. See, people are switching off already. Okay, we didn't like those, or that wasn't. I say we didn't. Okay, I'm giving mine. I shouldn't be giving my opinion here. That wasn't. I didn't feel since I've given my opinion that was advantageous to us as a supporter body, if you like, because it wasn't democratically elected. I just want to say that. So now, with the new construct, we now have a series of supporters groups who are basically elected by the fans, and they then go and hold dialogue with the club. Have I got that right in its most basic form?
Yes, you have, mate. Spot on. So supporters groups at West Ham who are affiliated to the FSA, which means they have to operate in a certain manner to maintain that affiliation. And one of those ways of operating is to be a democratic group in its own right. So you have various West Ham groups who hold FSA affiliation, Football Supporters Association affiliation. Those groups have come together to form an independent committee made up of all of those groups who hold FSA affiliation. That committee has created what's called a memorandum of understanding, which is essentially rules of engagement. And those rules of engagement were presented to and accepted by the club. So there now sits a memorandum of understanding that can govern engagement between that independent committee and the club. Now, there are different layers within this fan engagement. So the FSA set out these layers as fans forum at the most basic level, which would be inviting anybody to take part in dialogue with a club. The disadvantage of that is that it can be an event where thousands of people could turn up. You then have a fans parliament, which is essentially what the Independent Supporters Committee is. The idea being that people on that fans parliament are representative of the people who might want to turn up to a fans forum. Now, the interesting point to note here is that within the construct of the ISC, an agreement has also been made with the club to allow the next level of engagement to take place. The next level of engagement is called structured dialogue. So you progress from fans forum to fans parliament to structured dialogue.
Sure. And
then on top of that, you have supporter director, who would be somebody who actually sits, so to speak, on the board. The structured dialogue is where one group of the Independent Supporters Committee, for example, Hammers United, can, as a member of the Independent Supporters Committee, can request structured dialogue with board members from the club. So we might say, as Hammers United, we've got an issue that's pertinent to us and our members. As a member of the Independent Supporters Committee, we would now like to exercise our right to engage in structured dialogue in a meeting with board members as a group.
Okay, so you come to the conclusions when you discuss as a large group and then the elected committee member will then go and approach the club. And obviously, I take it that this agreement with this independent supporters committee, you basically have an accord with the club now to do this. There's an agreement in place.
Absolutely. So it runs on two levels. So you have the independent supporters committee who meet independently and who decide agenda items that they will take to the club in a meeting with club staff. And that would be the fans parliament. So you might be talking ticketing staff, you might be talking supporter liaison, you might be talking match day experience staff. So the independent supporters committee will go and meet with those club staff in what's called fans parliament. But any member of that fans parliament, if their group has something that they want to discuss individually with board members, they can now request structured dialogue, which is a meeting of, let's say, just Hammers United and board members from the club.
Well, that sounds really positive, actually. I think that sounds like a really, really good idea. Just if you wouldn't mind as well, I know this is obviously Hammers United getting your survey across. We'll get back to the survey in just a second, but it was important that we cleared that up before we get to the next graph. Some of the other supporters groups, if you just you know, let us know. Obviously, you might not be able to rattle all of them off, but who's involved, please?
Yeah, of course. Well, let me see if I can get all of them so that I don't miss anyone out. I'm just gonna glance across to my screen on the other side here to see if
WISA will be in there.
Yes, you've got West Ham United Independent Supporters Association, or WISA. You have bondholders are represented, the Disability Board, Pride of Irons, or the Over 65s, I think as they're known now. You've got the BAME Supporters Club, sorry, Pride of Irons, and then you've got Any Old Irons, I think, sorry, who are now the Over 65s. You have the Supporters Club as well, which existed obviously just next to the ground previously. So they have a supporters group in their own right where you can become a member and get entry to their premises. I'm just trying to think if I've missed anyone off.
Well, look, if you have, we apologise, but I think it is really important just to give the message across that actually this is this really does seem like a democratic way of consulting the club on various issues, and that everybody is involved. And I like the idea of the fans parliament, certainly. Right, so let's just move on to this next one, Andy, which is, bearing in mind we've just discussed all of these groups that have come together. These are the top three priorities for all the groups that we just mentioned.
Yeah, the purpose of showing this slide was really just to try and demonstrate how similar the pattern was when we looked at results. So what we did was we actually broke down the results for all of the FSA affiliated groups. So we went through each one individually. Essentially, what we're trying to demonstrate here is that there are slight discrepancies in the numbers. So you can see, as you've mentioned earlier, unsurprisingly, when you look at the campaign for new ownership, it's quite, you know, it's even more pronounced as the top priority amongst Hammers United members. But what's important on this slide is if you look at the pattern, the actual pattern doesn't really change from overall results, which is, of course, members of the fan base who are not Hammers United members included. Then you've got Hammers United members, and then you've got members of other FSA affiliated groups. And you'll see in every case that a campaign for a change in ownership is a priority for all sets of fans. The look and feel of the London Stadium is the second most important thing for all sets of fans. Bringing more local businesses and sellers to London Stadium is the third most important thing for all sets of fans. And then all of the others follow a very similar pattern in terms of priority when you start to look down at the consultation with supporters and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so I think that's probably, you know, just to look into that, regardless of which supporters group, hopefully all of whom, or certainly most of whom we've mentioned within the last couple of minutes. By far the biggest three priorities are the campaign for the change in ownership. You can see the look and feel of the stadium and bringing more local businesses in. But I do feel there are other things that are obviously really important on there, which I think every time you see it, it sort of strikes a chord, which is affordable mascot packages, which I know is down the list there. But, you know, for anybody that that can't afford that, and there's something that's certainly been picked up in the press about, you know, that's certainly interesting. And I think subsidised travel for away supporters, again, it's not particularly pertinent at the moment because nobody's going to matches home or away, but it is, I do feel it's an important issue. I think
what you've got to remember on that slide is had something come up as 0, you would have been able to say, right, that's not something that
Sure.
we should address as the Independent Supporters Committee, because not one single supporter has put it in their top 3. Whereas if anything on that slide has gained any traction and has got any votes, it means that somebody must have prioritized it above one of the other things in the list. You know, so being as there were 11 things in the list, somebody has put, or a fair few people have put affordable mascot packages in their top 3. You know, which means anything that features on that list has to be a priority for the Independent Supporters Committee.
Absolutely, and I am seeing an awful lot on that list, which the Independent Supporters Committee can probably impact. You know, I really do. I think there's an awful lot of good that can certainly come from this. Right, I'm gonna crack on just a little bit now. Moving on, we've got a communication, Andy. Just talk us through this, if you would. Quite obvious from the graphic there.
Well, there is a whole set of slides here, mate, that we can move through fairly quickly. And as you click through these slides, what you will see is you'll see that the picture in each one of these is quite stark. Now, the reason for all of these slides that you're about to see, and we can come back and we can draw people's attention to a couple of key points in a minute. But the reason for us putting in all of these slides around communication, culture, ticketing, you can see there, the stadium, and then we have slides on community and infrastructure as well. The reason for us putting in all of these slides was for us to try and get temperature checks on what is really important to West Ham fans if we're trying to look at our longer term direction and not just the specific immediate things that we discuss here and now with the Independent Supporters Committee. And that is really where we've got to take those things away as a committee at Hammers United, and we've got to sit around and really dissect those and say, you know, so if we click back to perhaps that communication slide and we're looking at that and we're thinking, right, what is really stark there? What has come across as really important points? And you've got 93% of people keen for the club to engage with the Football Association. And you've got 81% of people saying that at present, they don't feel that their views are considered and that the club is genuinely consulting them. So we can see that those two things are clearly really important for supporters. Now, they're not specifics that you can solve overnight, but they are things that you can make sure that you build into your longer term strategy. And if I just draw attention to a couple of others, on the culture slide, you've got one that you can see on the left hand side there. It is often talked about, but you can see that it is really important. That's 94% of people who would be, by implication, in favour of a consultation over the club crest. Now, the question does actually say the club crest should not be changed without consulting fans. But, you know, 94% having stated that they feel that they are in agreement with that would lead you to believe that they would be in favour of a consultation. And then I think if we just take a look again at the stadium one, you can see again how important the stadium is to fans. And again, it's not something that will be solved overnight, but it's something that we must use to underpin our long-term direction. So you've got the design of the stadium needs to be further improved. That's 97% of people saying the design of the stadium needs to be improved. And then you've got 91% of people saying that they would like sections, dedicated sections for people who want similar match day experiences. And I suppose the last one where you had a really stark, really stark outcome was on the community slide, where you've got not only chain restaurants and bars being mentioned. So on that one, you've got a really strong 76% of people saying that they're not in favour of the use of chain restaurants and bars at the stadium. And then alongside that, 81% of people, in a way, you know, that is linked because the question was next to it saying the club should do more to support local businesses. And you think about all it could do to bring those businesses to the London Stadium. So all of those slides that we've just flicked through there, whilst they are not things that we can fix overnight, that is, you know, really useful information for us to take away to get a real understanding of what we should be basing our kind of medium and longer term strategy on.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you're certainly you're striking a chord with me. That's my thing, that the stadium, and the seats for me are too far away. This is the one. It's not the one, but it's a major concern of mine and something that needs to be got right. And just looking at I mean, you've dressed it up. You've labelled it as community there, but it's a bit like a service station for me. And I know I'm giving my own personal opinion, but this is my subject of interest on out of the whole survey would be the stadium. You go to a service station. If you hadn't driven there, you didn't know what motorway you're on. One service station looks like another. You could be an E1. They have a WH Smiths, they have a McDonald's, they have a Costa Coffee. And that's fine. They suit a purpose. That's a service station. Well, a football stadium is not a service station, of course. And I do think it's important that your heritage is reflected within the catering and within the stalls that surround the stadium. And I look at a club when I've gone to Brighton away. I've always been so impressed with Brighton away, because if you've been there, Andy, the ale is from the local brewery. It's the pies again are from a local bakery, and you just feel that there's an authenticity about it. And they've tried to, even if there's not particular, all right, we do have a cuisine, Empire Mesh, which is associated with West Ham, but we're not on our own in that. There's plenty of clubs up north who, you know, again, will have a cuisine which they'll feel is very much relevant to their own one. And maybe Brighton don't have a cuisine which is associated being in Brighton, but they've still got the local community involved in that. And I do feel that would really have helped the transition if there was a little bit more. And certainly if we just bring it up again, you know, if there were less chains, which is what the graph shows, and certainly more local businesses. And it's not all about Nathan's, because I mean the club would say, well, Nathan's didn't want to be there. That would be their answer. But it's not just all about that. It's just, I think it's about the general feel and whatnot. Yeah. Sorry, Matt, carry on.
I think the stadium and the whole move in general is a very interesting one, because I think that is the biggest wound, you know, for a lot of people. That is the biggest bone of contention that people have with the owners. And I think what it comes down to, from having spoken to a lot of people about it, is that they don't feel the intentions behind the stadium move were the intentions that they were told they were. So a lot of people are starting to draw their own conclusions behind why the stadium move happened and what the stadium move was actually about. And what that has led to is actually led to, from there, every other decision being questioned, where people are now drawing their own conclusions about every decision the owners make. You know, if we signed Ronaldo, people would say, well, why haven't they signed Messi? You know, because they now that I think they've let themselves down big time with the stadium move. And now that they've done that, even decisions that are, you know, microscopic in the grand scheme of things. So they put a club sale on and everyone's club cash goes disappearing. Now it might just be a computer error, but because they've lost that trust over the stadium move, people draw their own conclusions and they say, oh, I bet they've held the club cash back so that you have to go and spend your own money in the sale. And it kind of tells you that now that stadium move has happened in the way that it did, you know, for a lot of people, I think that they're onto a loser with any decision they make.
I mean, yeah, but absolutely. I think certainly a 100% successful stadium migration, with it looking and feeling the way, you know, it was suggested that it would. I don't think you have the massive call that there is for the change in ownership. I do think it is. There's no doubt about it. Moving from Upton Park to the Olympic Stadium is probably why we're here talking about results for survey today, mate. Right, just so as we can, just the last thing here. This is really good. So this is what means most. If you just want to talk us through this, please, mate.
Yeah, we thought this was a really nice way to finish up, and it's essentially a wish list. So we put on a load of things here, and again we asked people to prioritize. We said pick your top three, and this was, if all of these things in the list were a reality, which would be your top three? So what do West Ham fans want? If they could have anything, what do they want? And you can see there, you know, we're a relatively reasonable bunch. So people said that they'd love to win a domestic trophy, and so you can see why there is the hype around the FA Cup every season. The home ground comes up again. You know, if we could have it, people would want a new home ground. Just consistently finishing in the top half of the Premier League. If you've got that domestic trophy and you're a top half club, that's where people believe we should be. And then interestingly, you've got fourth on the list there, strengthening the relationship between supporters and the club, which means that 40% of people selected that as one of their top three priorities for West Ham United, above the three things that you can see on the screen and the list there, which, you know, it speaks to the fact that if new owners were to come in and they wanted to know, you know, they wanted a kind of roadmap of, right, how do I fix this club? How do I get the fans on board? They are not things that are beyond the realms of possibility. You know, having a strong ownership with your supporters, winning a domestic trophy, finishing in the top half of the league, and perhaps one day fixing or building a new ground. They're not, you know, we're not asking, I don't think, for too much if somebody has got the money and the inclination to come in and do that.
Do you think, what do you think constitutes the spiritual heartland? What do you think, having gathered so much information, what do you think that is
That's a really good question, mate. I think it depends. It depends what generation you're from, and it depends what your knowledge of history is. Because of course there was a move at one point to the bowling ground. That hasn't always been our ground. So if you look into your history, you might say that the Memorial Ground is our spiritual heart, and or you might go right back to Thames Ironworks. So I think for that you'd need to ask the supporters. For me it is Upton Park, because that's really, when I was growing up, that's all I knew about. That's all I knew as our spiritual homeland. But obviously now, having looked into it, I do know a bit more. I don't think it necessarily would have to be away from Stratford. I just think really the key in that is either a vastly improved or a new home ground. And you asked earlier whether I've been to Brighton, and this is it is a bit of a boast, but something that allows me to kind of sit back and draw these conclusions. Is until Barrow got promoted and Harrogate got promoted, I had actually done all 92 grounds. And I would say West Ham is up there with the worst. It is possibly the worst. It's certainly the only one I can think of where every single home fan is searched on the way into the ground. And the minute you arrive, and that's your start to the day, and you're on this island of, like you say, that feels like a service station. It just doesn't feel like a proper football experience.
No, well, there's certainly been trouble with the conversion, and certainly, well, I would argue that it is still not been fully converted. But particularly in the middle of the pitch. I know they're trying to move the behind the goal closer to the pitch, but I would argue the two larger stands they're dealing with before that does. I mean, the fact
it's interesting you mentioned the reconfiguration, because I go back to those decisions that people make their own inferences from decisions owners make. So that decision was portrayed as one which was done to improve the supporter experience, and yet a lot of West Ham fans would say that actually that decision was taken so that the conversion, from mode to mode of the stadium is cheaper. So again, it kind of comes back to the point of these current owners and really whether they will ever get to a point where people will forgive the decisions they've made in the past, and where people will actually believe the rationale they give for the decisions that they make in the future. And that's not up to me to decide. That's, I'm not giving my own personal opinion here. I'm saying that, what the survey results speak to, and what a lot of our conversations speak to, is that people just want a fresh start, where we're working alongside people who we can build trust with, rather than people who they feel that they have lost all trust for.
Well, Andy, listen, I think that's a good point to wrap it up. I wish you well. I mean, in particular with the Independent Supporters Committee, I hope that this enables you to have better dialogue with the club for all of our benefits. I hope the Supporters Parliament and all of these things, really do.
We're really excited about that, mate. And I will just say something on that before we go. Obviously, I've spoken a fair bit today about the owners, and what we do is not all about the owners. The way that I often try and explain this to people is, if you were, say if you were moving to a new house and you had your heart set on a new house and that's all you wanted, but your boiler broke down, you wouldn't say, well, no, don't fix our boiler now because we've got our heart set on a new house. We're going to go, we'll just have cold water for 6 months. And when we get our new house, it will be fine. So if somebody comes to Hammers United and says, look, my season ticket's been relocated and I've been moved away from my children, my family. We can't turn around to them and say, don't worry guys, we're campaigning for new ownership. When the new owners arrive, everything will be fixed and this will all be better. The Independent Supporters Committee is really important for day-to-day things that we can help our members and supporters out with, and we are really excited about that committee, not only now but in the future, and what that relationship might bring.
And I'll ask you a question actually. Would it be fair to say that with Hammers United, right, when it started off, it was very much a case of GSB out, let's say, but now because of the growth, because of the membership, because you can hold a survey and get, you know, over 5,000 people participating in it, you've now found yourself in perhaps more of a position of influence, and perhaps one where you might, while it might not have been the initial intention, you now find yourself in a position where actually you are asked and you are mandated to actually do some of these other things that you just mentioned, which it might be to help somebody out with their ticket, to help improve the match day experience and all of that. How's that been? So I know we didn't plan to talk about this, but you know, I wanted to ask it. How's it been transitioning from one to find yourself almost lobbying for change, and actually now finding yourself in a position where, well, actually now we have to act as a conduit between the fans and the board, the very people that we want out, if you like? Yeah,
it's a very important question, mate, and it's the question that we get asked most often, which is how can you possibly protest and meet with the club and try and bring about improvements at the same time? In terms of our journey, we actually started out as a group who were pushing for change at the club and pushing for dialogue. Not many people will realize that the GSB Out One movement isn't one that we created. It's actually one that we joined. We joined that movement about a year into our existence. So our first protest, which was January of 2020, that protest was actually a protest for independent structured dialogue. The protest was about getting dialogue with the club. In between that protest and our second protest, our members asked us to adopt a GSB Out stance. And so the second protest, which was the stroll along the Greenway, that was a protest for new ownership. And since that point, we have held a position that our members wish us to campaign for new ownership. And so that is what we will do. And to answer your question around how that works as a group specifically, it's really difficult. It's really, really difficult, because if we push GSB Out messaging, people will quite rightly assume that we are a protest group, and many people will join up and sign up because they want to protest. If we push messaging around our involvement in the Independent Supporters Committee, people will quite rightly assume that we are a supporters association, and they may well join up because they want to have a say in some more day-to-day matters that go on at the club. So a real challenge for us is getting people to understand that we believe that we can do both at the same time, and that we can push both messaging. And the way that we decouple them, if you like, is that we see the campaign as one that our members are asking us to continue with. So we are not a group that was set up to campaign. We are purely a supporters group set up to improve things for West Ham supporters. Now, if those West Ham supporters are saying the way that you guys can improve things for me is to campaign for new ownership, then we feel that our mandate is to campaign for new ownership. That mandate may change. And when we talk about the campaign for new ownership, we are talking specifically about 3 people. And we are also talking about a campaign and not a destruction of the club in total. So we are talking about making sure that it's a campaign where it's done properly and it's portrayed in a positive light, and it's not purely a destruction of everything that exists at the club. And then on another level, we have improving things for supporters, where supporters might say, yep, we do want you to continue campaigning for new ownership, but to improve things for me, can you actually just try and sort out my season ticket because I can't get through to the club? Or can we just get this badge fixed because I hate it? Or, you know, seriously, do I have to pay £800 for a mascot? You know, I don't want to wait for new owners. I want my boy to be a mascot, and I want it to be a reasonable price. So, you know, it's a great question, and it's one that we're often asked, and we, you know, it is a challenge for us, but we do believe we can work on both levels at the same time.
Mate, thank you very much. I wish you luck. You know, walking walking that tightrope between the two. I wish you luck, particularly with the new committee as well. That's going to be really, really interesting. Hopefully, we can see an awful lot of good things coming back from that. And lastly, mate, thank you very much for your time.
Well, thanks very much for having us on again, mate. It's always a pleasure.
You're very welcome. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate.